My name's Wendy. I'm here in Maryland. Some of you I know, some of you I have never met. And thank you for filling out the survey, those that did, that gave us a sense of who would be here. If you didn't fill it out, it's no big deal. Um, we know a little bit about you because we know you're here to learn how to facilitate groups. And you're most probably a caregiver, um, someone that wants to lead a group, someone that's already leading a group, and some of you have been doing this for a very long time. So we have a mix of people with experience, and I'm going to be speaking to you, all of you, those of you with less experience, those of you with more. And I'm going to be teaching you how to effectively facilitate a support group for CurePSP, MSA, CBD, and for caregivers and for patients alike. So, yeah, let's get started. So how to facilitate a support group. Here we go. There will be parts of the presentation today where we will interact a little bit and you'll get a chance to ask questions, but bear with me for the beginning part where I'm pretty much going to be just talking to you, just to get us in the framework of all of this. So we're going to get into the meat of it. So compassion brings love to suffering. This was an article that I read in the New York Times, and I just really liked this quote. The only thing worse than assuming you can get the better of suffering is imagining you can do nothing in its wake. Sometimes it's those things we least understand that deserve our deepest trust. Isn't that what love and wonder tell us too? So a big part of bringing love to the people that we love and sharing love with them is through compassion. And the same is true for ourselves, for the self-compassion, bringing love to ourselves as well. And the next slide is a quote that I really like from A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh. Everything seems to have changed forever, as it has and always does. If there ever comes a day when we can't be together, keep me in your heart. I'll stay there forever. And the next slide. And now we'll get into why we even do support groups. And I think those two slides from me really explain why we do these, why we are facilitators of these groups. They strengthen relationships, our own relationship with ourselves, our own relationship with others, create connections between people. We explore and support groups' challenges that we're having with our family member, with our loved one, and with other people in our family and friends and work and different relationships. We tell the story. And a big part of telling the story and sharing with each other is being witnessed. It's being presenced. There is a grief expert named David Kessler. You may or may not have heard of him. He has some great books, one that's called Finding Meaning. And he says that to be fully present to the magnitude of a person's loss without trying to point out any silver lining is what it means to be witnessed by others. And he says it's something that we all need. So this is something that a support group absolutely does. We're not trying to fix anyone or make anything better. We're not trying to sugarcoat anything. We are present with each other. And that's something that's very hard to find, even in our daily lives or with our family and friends when we're going through something like a disease or something that is life-changing, like like PSP or MSA or CBD. It's impossible to completely fathom what that means. So people, as we know, say things, and maybe some of those things are kind of sugarcoating a silver lining. Maybe it won't be so bad. That doesn't happen in our support group. It's the one place we know we can be present with each other and witness each other and be witnessed. So we make the support groups are helpful by making the journey a communal experience, by helping to reduce the isolation that we experience, that people experience, allowing the person to compare their reactions to others. How do others cope? And we learn from each other because we see how other people are coping with a similar situation. And it gives hope. It gives us ideas. It gives us a relative comparison. It gives us a perspective. And again, it satisfies the need to be witnessed by other people. And the next, please. Thank you. Support groups increase well-being for people by providing a particularly expressive, understanding, supportive, informative, and permissive environment. That is the role of a support group. So now we're going to be talking about the support group itself and the structure. How does it work? And within that, we're going to then be talking about what is a facilitator's role in the support group. So the definition of a group is two or more people interacting together. So what that means is that if you have a facilitator and a caregiver, or a facilitator and a patient, I will use the term patient, but you know what I mean when I say that. Someone that has PSP, MSA, CBD, it's a mouthful to keep saying that each time. So I'll just substitute that, the patient word. So it's, if you have a facilitator and a patient, you are still a group if you are interacting together. So that's very important, because if you are sitting in a room and two people are not interacting, you're technically not a group. Thank you, Kelsey. It looks like the computer is doing its own thing right now.
I'm sorry, I was just clicking and it
it's perfectly fine. We had fun with this yesterday too. So forgive us when we have a little bit of glitches with our slides. So the ideal size of a group is between 6 and 12 people. So that's ideal. That doesn't mean when you have a smaller group, less than 6, that it's too small, or when you have a bigger group, more than 12, it's too big. It just means that this is going to be the most ideal size for you as a facilitator and for everybody in the group to be able to interact and really get a sense from a lot of people, a handful of people, of what their experiences have been and are, and to get suggestions and to give suggestions and to share stories and to witness each other, etc. If you have a small group, if you have 2 or 3 people, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that you might shorten the time of your group. Instead of it being an hour and a half, it might be an hour or 45 minutes if it's 2 or 3 people. You're still going to do the same things that we're going to talk about today. And you're still going to try to do the things for reaching out and getting the word out through CurePSP and other ways that we'll talk about, because I know one person did have the question about attendance and how you increase attendance. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. With a larger group, if it's over 12 to 15, you want to consider at any given meeting splitting up into 2 groups. You can do that with breakout rooms. If you're a little bit concerned about how to do the video part of the breakout rooms, then don't do it. Don't worry about it. But it is an option that if you feel comfortable doing that, and if that was the case and you chose to do that, you could do your introduction together. And you could then split up based on disease. You could split up based on if it's a caregiver patient group. You could split up based on whether, split the caregivers and patients. Or you could just split down the middle and it would make no difference. It just ends up being just right, because people are learning from each other. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to be exactly the same. We don't have to have exactly the same diagnosis or all be caregivers. If it's a caregiver patient group, there's a lot to be learned, as you know, from both. That being said, when you have a caregiver patient group, there are things you can't talk about in a mixed group that you can talk about separately. So if you have a larger group, splitting up into two can be a good option so that caregivers can have some separate time, patients can have some separate time. Then you'll come back together at the end to do your summary, and we'll talk about that, the summary, in a minute. An open group, and we're going to get to, you can stay on this slide, Kelsey. An open group is when people come and go. So it's open to anybody that can come anytime. A closed group is often something that professionals will do. It's not as common with peer volunteers doing a closed group, but basically it's a certain amount of sessions where there's a curriculum. So there's a teaching part, like what I'm doing, and then there'd be a sharing part after the teaching part. So that's closed group, and typically, again, done with professionally led groups more often. Your groups are probably going to be more of the open groups where people come and go, and they're always welcome. So the structure of the group, the first thing's your introduction, really important. Hello, my name is, this is the time of the group. You always begin and end on time within a minute, couple minutes, because you want to respect people's time. So people that got there and are waiting, you want to get going when it's time. You also want to end on time, even if people have more to say. So if people have more to say, it's really okay to end on time anyway, because we want people to come back. We really want to end when there's a lot of a lot of let's say, I was going to say excitement, but it's not quite the right word, a lot of interaction. That's what's going to bring people back. You don't want to just keep going, oh, it's such a good discussion, let's just keep extending it. That's just going to tap people out, Zoom people out if you're on Zoom. And also, it can phase that you're not respecting their time. So always remember to begin and end on time. The purpose of the group is to share experiences. And we're going to get to this in the next slide. So I'm not going to go further than that, but just to share that the purpose is to share experiences. What I'm giving you right now is, think of it as a recipe. So this is your formula or your recipe for a successful support group. Purpose, share experiences. Guidelines, we'll get into that too. So the introduction is your welcome and your time, your purpose and your guidelines, which we'll explain in just a minute, and then your go round. Your go round after you do your introduction is when you say, now I'd like if we could go around, or we, I like to use the term we as much as possible because we is a cohesive term. So when you're not talking about your feelings, because you never want to say I feel, we feel, you want to say I feel. You can use the term we because it connotes we as a group. It's very cohesive. So we'll go around and each person, if you would please, say your name and what brought you to the group today. So that will tell you a lot of information, and each person will go around and say that. You can vary that question. You can say more specifically, if it's a caregiver group, for example, or if it's a mix, could you please share your name, if it's a virtual group, what state you're coming from or place you're coming from on the globe, and are you a patient or a family member? You're a person with PSP, CBD, MSA, or a caregiver / family member. And then likewise, you do it if it was two separate groups similarly. And what brought you here? What are you looking for here from the group? Now, you want it to be relatively brief. So it's always good to start with somebody, if you do have a group that's met more than once, somebody that's done this before. And then people will imitate and they'll just go around and do the same thing, one after the other. After each person is done, and of course you can start it yourself. If you have a co-facilitator, wherever they're sitting, they will, of course, share as well. Or you can have the person next to you that's been there for a while start it, and then you would end up being the one at the end. It really doesn't matter. You can experiment with that. After everyone's gone around the circle, you then ask a question. And the question is a topic question, or it's a question as general as, and should be an open-ended question, not a yes or no answer question. Something like, what has been important for you or has been going on for you in this past month since we met? Or if it's the first meeting, we'd like to get to know each other a little bit. So if we could start a discussion, and I'll just throw up a question about what has this disease, what has been going on for you, and how are you coping and living with this disease? So whether it's PSP or MSA or CBD, you can vary the question. I just gave you a couple. It could be a topic. In your book, in your manual, you have a list of a whole bunch of topics. And you can even use a topic for your question to initiate this phase of the group. And some of these are family issues and how to talk with your loved one about his or her disease if it's a caregiver group. What's it like to get the diagnosis? Improving communication, long distance caregiving, parent adult child relationships, how to talk with family and friends about just this whole list, has so many great topics. So you can always go topic oriented or just that general question. And that will start a discussion. And then each person will respond to the question and people will talk to each other. And you're not going to talk more than anybody else. You're going to talk just as much as other people, but not more than anyone else. So that's a good guideline. I feel like a good gauge. You can kind of gauge the amount you're talking based on other people's quantity of speech. And that goes on for the bulk of the meeting, the sharing experiences part stage. And then we have our summary. Now we're going to go through those a little bit more specifically. So in the next slide, the purpose. So as part of your introduction, after your hello, my name is, welcome everybody, the purpose of the support group, you say, this exact thing, is to share experiences, notice I bolded that, related to living and coping with PSP, MSA, CBD, or related disease. So the reason I bolded that is that this is not a group that is trying to change anyone's feelings, way of being, give a prognosis, diagnose, give advice. It's just simply to share experience. And that might sound simple, and I use the term simply just now, and yet it's so big. It's so important because where else can you do this? Nowhere else. There's no other place. Next slide, please. So these are the guidelines. So remember in the introduction, we said you're going to say a welcome, state the purpose, and then the guidelines for the group. And I'll pretend I'm just doing that. Well, the guidelines for the group are that we don't give advice, we offer suggestions. So instead of giving advice, I like this way better. Let me correct myself. I like not to say we don't give. I like not to put it in the negative. I just feel like it's always better received when we don't put things in the negative. So I might say, instead of offering advice, we give suggestions. Or you could just say it like I wrote it here. Offer suggestions based on personal experience. Everyone has an opportunity to share. This addresses the issue when someone talks a little too much. I don't know if you've ever had that in a group, and I'm sure everyone has, even if it is in a support group, where just someone's talking a little too much and they're not in a role as teacher. So they're in a role of support group member. And that's where what we're going to say to the group is everyone has an opportunity to share. So we want to try to make it as as balanced as possible. That's all you need to say. And forgive me if we're taking too much time in one situation, I might have to move the group on a little bit. And that's a helpful thing to say, because when you have to do it, it always, you can refer back to, remember when I said that I might have to do that sometimes. Um, it's all light, it's all caring. It's not rules and enforcing, rules. It's just guidelines that are going to keep us safe, emotionally and physically safe, and make us all feel that we are part of this really cozy, warm container. And I say container as a circle, as a group. The next guideline, I'm going in. Oh, Amit, if you could please put yourself on mute, or actually, Kelsey, maybe you could mute everybody but me.
Anita, are you able to come?
Yes, come
Come on
in.
in.
Yes, please. Maybe you can mute Amit, because he might not. Sometimes people don't quite know how to do that. Thank you. So I'm going into these pretty specifically. All you have to do is read them. You can have a paper where you read them. Once you get them in your head, you can memorize them. If you have a co-facilitator, one of you will do the introduction to this whole part, and one will lead the summary, which we'll get to. Another guideline is that we are supportive and non-judgmental. And that kind of goes without saying. But every once in a while, someone doesn't mean to be, but they might say something in comparison to someone else's disease, or, well, with PSP isn't as bad as this, or, someone might say something that slightly feels it could be taken in a judgmental way. So you would want to, as a facilitator, go back to this guideline. And I'll teach you how to do that. But right now, we're just going over them. We're providing a safe atmosphere for expression of our feelings, of everyone's feelings. It is a support group. The last one is what is shared in the group stays in the group. And this deals with the confidentiality issue, that whatever we talk about, we have to all be really sure and trust. Now, these guidelines you're always going to verbalize, even if you have the same people every session of your group. You verbalize them, because what they serve to do is bring us together again in this place where we remember what we're doing here. Okay, so always say them. The role of the facilitator is not the expert, and that might come as a surprise. And it's also very liberating. You don't have to be the expert. Everyone in the group is the expert. So anytime something comes up, your basic response is, let's ask the group. Let's ask the group. You're going to be a broken record. The group's expertise is in their experience. And Valerie is telling us that there's a guidelines PDF on the volunteer portal that has some things. And also she said she really likes the video on empathy. I love that. And she put the link in the chat by Brené Brown. I've seen that and I love that. It's a great video. So I recommend people take a look at that too. So we're going to encourage, this is your role. What do you do? You're a facilitator. What am I supposed to do in this group? You're going to encourage constructive interaction in the group. And these are some ways you do it. One, you use active listening. You're using eye contact at everyone in the room, whether it's physical or virtual. You're noticing how they're feeling based on what information you get from your senses, from looking and from listening. And you're including everyone in the discussion. You're using one of the little teaching tricks that Al Nixon likes a lot. One of your group leaders, he always says how much he uses this. It's WAIT, and it stands for Why Am I Talking? And I always laugh because it's a really good way to catch ourselves. Oh, I'm talking again. Maybe I don't need to be. Because sometimes when we get a little anxious, or if there's silence, we'll jump in and we'll try to fill the silence. So what Al says is he tries to wait like 30 seconds. if there's silence before he says anything, you know. So just a tool to use, because typically someone will always break silence. And often the facilitator doesn't have to be the first one to do it. Just keeping that in mind. We're role modeling healthy boundaries by doing good self-care. I know that's really hard, especially as caregivers. It's so hard, and it is important, and it's important to talk about in the group. Great topic. So in your beginning of sharing experiences, that stage of the group, that could be one of that topic for the evening, to at least to start out on. When you throw out a question, if it is topic related, it doesn't have to be for the whole group. It can just get the group started in discussion. So you don't have to be fixated on staying with that for the whole time. Having a co-facilitator, some of you will, some of you won't. The best way to pick a co-facilitator is not to just blindly start out with not knowing someone actually and picking them, but it's actually the best thing is to find them from within the group. Somebody that you feel comfortable with from within the group is the best way to do it. And just to have them maybe help you a little bit and see how you feel. Otherwise, just picking them blindly, it can work out great, but it's a little bit like a blind date. Sometimes it can work really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So I always say, be patient. You don't have to have a co-facilitator right away. If you do, great. And if you don't, it will come. In a co-facilitator relationship, should you have one, do make sure that right after the group meets that you have some time to process together how the group went. Before the group meets, who's going to do the introduction, who's going to do the summary, and after, processing how it went. Was there anything I said or did that was a problem for you? I was a little uncomfortable with this, or this was really helpful. Start to really be able to be authentic and genuine together. And you can always sandwich compliments. My daughter does this really well for me. She'll tell me something she's upset with me about, and she sandwiches it into something that she is positive. So it doesn't feel like it's so much a criticism. It feels more like it's constructive feedback. So I really like that. We talked about topics for discussion, making it the group's group. The more that you ask the group, what does the group think? What does the group think? On and on. The more it's the group's group. The less you dominate the discussion, the more it's the group's group. That's what you want to do. You want it to be a group where people come not because of you. They come because they want to be part of this group. And if it's yours, it's never going to be something people are going to gravitate to because it's theirs. So that's our goal. And one way you do it is to not act like an expert, to ask the group. Now, that doesn't mean you can't self-disclose. If you're a caregiver yourself, of course you can self-disclose and say, my experience has been thus and so. Or I have heard someone else say, because you've had a lot of experience in the group and a lot of experience with these diseases, of course, but so is everyone else. So just keep that in mind. And the more you make it the group's group, the more people want to come to it. So again, the first role is to encourage constructive interaction for you. And the second role for you is to manage difficult discussions and situations. And we're going to go into that too. So still in the role of the facilitator, we said you don't prescribe or diagnose. That's why the purpose is so important, why I bolded those 3 words, sharing experiences. You encourage the sharing, not advice. What's the difference between advice and sharing? Advice is you should do this. Sharing is my experience has been, or this is what was helpful to me, or I might suggest, or have you thought of? You're going to set the guidelines, which we went over just now. They're in your appendix, by the way, of your manual. So all of this is in the manual. Everything I'm talking about reflects what's in there, but it's always better to have different ways of hearing it. So this is giving you a new way. And you remind the group as needed during the meeting. So this is the beauty of the guidelines. When someone is, where do you get a manual? Julian says, Kelsey will respond to you, Julian, and tell you that in the chat. Thank you. And maybe you could respond to everyone in case they don't have it. Thank you for that question. So the beauty of these guidelines is when someone is giving advice, all you have to do is say, oh, excuse me a moment. You could talk to the whole group. You don't have to just say this directly to that person. Excuse me for a moment. Just wanted to remind everybody of one of our guidelines that we said at the beginning, where we talk about our experiences. So let's try to get back to that. It's really easy to get off of that, I know. But we always try to talk from our experiences instead of give advice, because it's received better from that place. So that's the way. I just used a lot of words to say it. All you have to do is say, one of our guidelines is to share experiences. So let's get back to that. What has been your experience, Julian? I'm using that as an example. I'm not asking Julian. So acts as a participant observer. You as a facilitator are an observer. You use active listening, your senses to look, to listen, to feel what's going on in the group. And that's how you know what questions to ask and how to guide the group. And when someone is monopolizing, or when someone is giving advice, or if someone is judging without realizing it, or if someone's very upset and crying, someone's having a difficult time with something someone's talking about, that's how you know. The participant part is the part where you self-disclose. So if you're a caregiver yourself or a patient, you can self-disclose and say, my experience has been. Otherwise, you're not going to participate as a participant. The observer part, again, is encouraging people to interact constructively, which we just went over. And the second thing, managing difficult situations or conversations in the group. Promoting cohesiveness, we talked about making it the group's group. Remember, using we terms, making sure everybody gets a chance to talk, noticing behaviors that you want to say, you know, I notice you're crying and we're here and we care about you. You don't just pretend you don't notice. You say, we're here for you. We care. Do you want to talk, or would you rather not right now? There's even a possibility, if someone is very upset, that they might want to go out and have a one-to-one conversation with someone and come back when they feel a little bit better. So that can happen too. Awareness of wanting to fix. This is a really big issue for all of us, because we are people who care so much that we want to make things better for people. And when people like us and healers are in a position of facilitating a group, we have a hard time putting that aside. And it's just having the awareness. It's not that we need to change it. It just means that we want to be aware that all we're here to do is share experiences. Now, in that, we give people experiences and ideas, and people do the same thing. And there's a lot of learning and information that goes around, but we're not trying. Guess this would be the way to say it. Where is all that coming from? Is it coming from a place of compassion? Is it coming from a place of presencing the person, witnessing the person, allowing them to tell their story, and the magnitude of loss associated is heard and presenced, but not trying to make it better? So that's just something that is an interesting thing to be aware of for us, all of us. And the next slide. So here's some skills. And once we get through these skills, we're going to then open up to some more interaction. But I'd like to just go through the skills briefly because you know them, you just maybe haven't thought of them in this way. So I'm a facilitator, you say. So how do I do these things you're talking about? So we talked about active listening. This is how people feel heard. We accept people unconditionally. It doesn't matter what they say. We have compassion for them. Of course, we all know that we're going to be non-judgmental because that's one of the guidelines. We know we're going to only give suggestions and share, not give advice. We're not going to monopolize, and we're going to make sure everything stays in the group. So that's already been said. But we accept each other without conditions, without expectations. Otherwise, we respond with empathy. Same thing, compassion, empathy, really very similar. When someone is speaking, we, as a facilitator, can use a skill that is called restatement or reflection. And what it is where we are repeating what the person said. So I might say, so one of the things you said, Amit, is, and I might repeat it by paraphrasing in my own words. That helps people feel they've been heard. It's also a way when you do this, use this skill of restatement or reflection, you can then throw that out to the group and say, has anyone else ever experienced this? So you're using verbal paraphrasing while you do that because you're not using their exact words. And another skill is, this is a great one, articulating underlying unspoken affect or issues. So if someone brings up an issue and it sounds like they feel bad about it, we can actually use a skill, this skill, it's often called breaking taboos, where we actually bring up what we're hearing underneath. So guilt, shame, could I have done anything differently? Could I do anything differently? What would have happened if this had been a different situation altogether? Feeling completely exhausted by caregiving. Uh, all of the things that we might feel bad about saying that the facilitator hears in the things that the group members say. Those things can be brought out. In fact, that's your role. It's a skill to bring those things out by saying it's often really hard to talk about. Feeling so exhausted and burnt out, and as if we have had enough, we can't go on. You know, those are really hard feelings. And sometimes someone in the group, well, that's just an example, but sometimes someone in the group will say it. But sometimes people say it and they cloak it or veil it in caution because they're afraid to say it because they don't know that other people feel the same. Someone in yesterday's training, the centers of care with professionals, brought up suicidal feelings. Many people have those feelings, and it's hard to talk about because you feel like you're the only one. But when we're in a position where we're in great, either witnessing great suffering and or experiencing great suffering, it's a very normal feeling that that comes and goes. So these are all hard things to talk about, unspoken often. But if the facilitator senses that that is beneath or behind, or if a person brings out a little bit of it, it is a really important thing for you to make that okay in the group. And we call that validation. And we'll talk about validation in just a minute. Asking questions. I'm broken record. You're going to keep asking questions. What do people think? How would people handle this situation? What have you done before? How has this worked for you? We're not interested in the why questions so much. It's the what and how. And with all this, of course, you're demonstrating interest and involvement non-verbally just by leaning in and being present. Because isn't it amazing, even virtually, the way we feel each other? I'm still totally amazed by that when I look at a group of people in a virtual room, and you can feel one another as well as you can do physically. So it is something that we're capable of doing. This energy between us is palpable. People feel you, and you feel them. So this validation is the next skill, normalizing. How do you do it? How do you normalize something someone is saying? You support, you're present, you listen with empathy and acceptance. You share yourself, which we call self-disclosure, and other people share too. You're also going to guide by eliciting suggestions from group members. What do other people think? Your feelings are understandable. That's not a question, it's a validation. So when someone is saying how they feel, you don't have to have an answer. You can just validate your feelings are understandable. Then be quiet. See who else now has something to say. Or you can say, what do other people think? Has anyone ever had that experience? And then let the ball go and let people continue to talk from the question. You can always repeat it. Yes, next slide. And then the next thing, so we have active listening, which we went over. Support is this one. Well, validate, we talked about. Now support, we listen and we care. We say these things. I understand. So you don't have to have answers. This is the brilliance of it all. It's liberating. It's free. For those of you that haven't led groups before, this is why it's easy. It's going to be easy for you because you already know these things. You don't have to know anything else, just the structure of the group. You just listen and care. I understand. I hear you. That must have been difficult, or that must be difficult. And then if you do self-disclose because you're a caregiver yourself or a patient yourself, my own experience has been not talking more than anybody else, but as a participant observer. That's your participant part of your role. What has been helpful to you is another question. You could go the whole group asking these questions and have a completely successful group just following the stages of the structure of the group that we went through. Next slide, Kelsey. And this is the last one, I believe, and then we get into a little bit of questions and things like that. So thanks for bearing with me. So the next big skill is to guide. And this is what we mentioned, where we elicit suggestions from group members, and then we guide the process. Questioning, we talked about. Breaking taboos, we talked about. If you have questions about this after, you can ask. Restatement, remember we talked about with reflection. Refocusing. So say someone, okay, your purpose, remember your purpose to share experiences related to living. Some people like and coping with PSP, MSA, CBD. Okay, if somebody gets off that topic, that's your big topic. That's your purpose. Everything should relate to that purpose. Like that's your big umbrella, right? And everything comes under the umbrella. I often think of it like a lighthouse, like we're little boats, and the lighthouse keeps us focused. We always know where we're going because we're going to come back to the purpose. Always come back to the purpose. Say you're sitting there and you're going, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. Come back to your purpose. Okay, guys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, let's share experiences related to living with these diseases. That's the purpose. All you need to do is come back to it. So if somebody gets off topic, the silly example that just comes to my mind is, say someone's talking about their pets and somehow they've lost the train of thought about what they were talking about before, then you just gently, you feel that, you notice that with your compassion, and you say, so how might you um, bring that into living and coping with these diseases? Do your pets help you? Something like that. Or self-care. Pets are an incredible, as you know, um, way of taking care of ourselves. So that's another way to just bring people back to the purpose. Linking is a skill, great skill in the group, where you have been there as facilitator for a while and probably had a number of sessions perhaps. And as time goes on, and someone brings something up in the group and you remember that Janine over here had a similar experience. So you might say, Janine, could you please share with Brian what your experience was with that? Or I remember, Janine, you had um, the same issue. Could you please talk about that? So it doesn't matter what the issue is. All of these are going to be common issues that you know that come up in the groups. What I'm trying to do is show you the wording to say it. You know, how do you do it? How do you link two people together? That's how. Gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is a skill where you open the gate and you let people in. And what that is in the literature, when we talk about group skills, group facilitation skills, is simply that when a person or people haven't had a chance to share, that you directly give them that opportunity. You're aware because you're observing the group as your participant observer that you are using your active listening, using your eye contact. You're aware when someone has not had a chance to really get in there and participate. Now, if you ask them, we say, Eileen, do you have something you would like to share? And Eileen says, no, I just rather listen. Then you can say, that is perfectly fine. We are just glad you're here. Now, notice how I said we. Again, promotes cohesiveness, makes it okay to be quiet. But you still used your gatekeeping, which says to everyone in the group that each person is important. And that's why gatekeeping is an important skill to use, and not to just let people be quiet and assume that's just because they want to be. Important to give them the opportunity and then let them know we're just glad you're here. Then referring, of course, you're always going to be, everybody's referring. It's not just you, because you're not the expert. Everyone's the expert because they're having this experience, and that gives them the expertise. But everyone's going to be doing that, and certainly you are going to be sharing resources as well. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, yeah. This one we'll just go over again too. Open-ended questions. So when we talk about questions, I said that we were getting to the place we're going to interact, and we are. And this is the second to last slide before we do that. Asking open-ended questions. What was that like for you? Notice these are what and how questions. They're not why questions, and they're not yes or no questions. What did you realize from that? How did you react when that happened? What did that mean to you? Can you tell us more about that? Next slide, please. You can also ask questions to the group as a whole. Who else? So instead of asking maybe a person, you can direct a question to an individual in the group. You can also direct it to the whole group. Who else has dealt with that situation or had that experience? How have others in the group dealt with it? Has anyone felt that way? Anyone felt the same way or similar? What do the rest of the group members think about that? So again, you could spend the whole time asking these questions and you would have a great group. When I say the whole time, you still have to use the group structure. You still have to do your introduction, your go round. But during the sharing experiences part, this is what it's about. And the next one. So this is the part, we're not going to go in gallery view because I just want for right now for you to look at these. So this is a part where we're going to ask some questions, talk a little bit to each other, with each other. And I'm going to check out chat to make sure there isn't anything that I missed. Valerie says, oh, Joanna said, okay. Yep, I think we're good. Okay. Is there something on this list that you feel you would like to know how to handle it? Or is there anything else that isn't on this list? Let me give you some ideas. Living with a diagnosis no one's heard of. How do we talk about that? How to empower ourselves, how to educate people, talking about medications, feeling burnt out, anticipatory grief. How do we talk about these things? How do we sensitively share with the group about a death in the group? How do we deal with the caregiver? Do we ask the caregiver how they want to be involved? Do they want to come back to the group? How do they want to relate in an ongoing way? How do we talk about home care? When is it time for that? How do we talk about intimacy issues? Palliative care. Does anyone have any of these things or anything on the list that jumps out at them that they might say, you might have a question about? Oh, okay. So Kat, let's go to gallery view while we answer questions. Can we, Kelsey? Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So Kat, where are you?
Hi, I'm right
There
here.
you are. There you are. Okay.
So I just had a question about like someone who, like, if you have someone in the group who repetitively interrupts,
Mm.
is that a conversation that like to what extent do you address that in front of other group members? And then to what extent do you address that individually?
That is such a great question. All your questions are going to be great questions. And this one is too. Um, so, very common. I'm assuming you've had this in a group because that's probably why you brought it up. This is a form of monopolizing behavior. Notice that I don't use the term monopolizing person, that the person is a monopolizing person. It's a behavior. It's something we've all done. It often people monopolize, or this is a form, like I said, or interrupt, but we can put this under the umbrella of monopolizing behavior because they might be a little anxious. It might be part of the disease, the impulsivity, perhaps it could be of a person who might have PSP or another one of the diseases. If it's a caregiver, we don't know what's going on in that person's life. Um, we come with so many things from in our lives and from our past that we have no idea whether people have any kind of illnesses of any kind, whether they be mental health related or not. Um, and being in a group sometimes can be very stimulating. And if someone is a little anxious, being in either a virtual group or a physical group can sometimes it's more sensory stimulation. So it can trigger, right? So knowing all those things, we don't have to be a professional to understand where monopolizing behavior can come from. Those are just very basic things that we know. So when someone interrupts, we're just going to go back to our guideline and we're going to, after once maybe or twice, then we notice, hey, I always say your antenna goes up. So where do you feel it when you're using active listening? Do you feel it in your stomach first, or do you feel it in your head, in your mind? Some people feel it in their stomach first. They start feeling like a little like, Some people feel it in their head. So I say your antenna goes up or you have a gut reaction. That's why that term is is it's very appropriate, a gut reaction. So you immediately know, this is a problem behavior, something that I need to manage. And you go back to your guideline, the one that says everyone gets a chance to talk, right? And you say, excuse me, and you can say to the whole group, let's just wait and give everybody a chance to finish what they have to say. And then you can put your hand, if it's a virtual group, you just give me a little hand raise if you have something you'd like to say. And then I can respond to you that way. Or if it's a physical group, it could be really the same technique. Just give me a little, hand raise before you speak. And then that way everybody will have time to go around and take their turn. So what you're doing is you're helping the person. You're kind of like modifying the behavior in a way, and you might say it's constructive manipulation. That's what a facilitator does. Manipulation isn't a bad thing. It's managing a situation when you have a job to do. It's a bad thing. We think of the term manipulation as a negative thing when we are doing it to get our needs met, our personal needs met. You're doing this because this is your job. This is your role. It's a volunteer job, but it's your role. It's something that you're expected to do so that there can be constructive interaction in the group. Does that make sense? And is that helpful? Okay. Now, that being said, Kat, you can also talk to a person one-to-one. You always have 3 possibilities to approach it in the group by just doing something like we just said, directing it to the group as a whole, this could be directed to the group as a whole and not necessarily focusing just on the person, or talking to the person one-to-one. When possible, I like doing things in the group because everybody learns from it and everybody shares it and we become stronger. Our relationships become closer. We know we can get through things. Other people are sitting there going, oh, that's really great that she did that or he did that, because that person was really starting to irritate me. That behavior was really becoming a problem for me. See, people will not come back to your group if things like that are allowed. They just won't. You're going to see a drop off in numbers. That's why it's so important that you don't let anything snowball, that you nip it in the bud. It doesn't have to be done in any reactive way. You just use your guidelines. That's what they're there for you to do. Yep. Thank you. Let's just see if somebody, I think, wrote in. Let's see, 3 new messages. Uh-oh, how do I get to those? How do you help a caregiver focus on themselves and not just on their patient? That's a very good, interesting question. Where did you find your caregiver? Okay, when I'm talking about caregiver, actually right now, Julian, I'm talking about like loved one, person that comes to the support group.
Right. I realize that I didn't clarify, but the other question has to do with professional caregivers. People want to know where you got them and what do you pay,
That's a great support group question. Kelsey and Joanna, could you respond to that? And as Eileen said, Julian, we would love to see you go to his group.
I think if I'm understanding correctly, Julian, you're wondering how to handle questions when people bring that up in support groups.
Right.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you so much. I laugh at myself. Thank you, Julian. And thank you, Joanna. Okay, so the question when it comes up, where did you find your caregiver? How much do you pay them? Got it. So yes, those are very appropriate questions to talk about in the group. I think you don't dwell on them, but I think it's certainly appropriate. What are people's experiences? Everyone's is going to be different. Now, Julian, what I think that you're getting to in a very subtle and very important way is you always want to let the group members know, as the facilitator, that Everybody's situation is different. And what works for one person doesn't work for the other. And this would be true for how to find your caregiver. This would be true for how much to pay them. But having a little conversation about that, as long as it doesn't monopolize the whole group, is very appropriate. Now, how do you help a caregiver focus on themselves and not just their patient, their loved one, or their person that they're caring for? That is a really interesting question. We are not here to change people. So let's go back to that for a second. Let's go back to our purpose, to share experiences related to living and coping with, as a caregiver or patient, depending on which group, or if it's a combined group, with these diseases. So let me ask you this question. Is it up to us to, what was the word that you used? I love, this is so helpful. Thank you, Julian, for this question. Is it up to us to help them focus on themselves and not just their patient loved one? That's just a question.
Probably not.
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I like that you asked it, and I love your awareness with your answer. Anybody have another point of view on that?
I think that's
go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that that gives the opportunity to either open up to the group or ask that person, like, what have you done for self-care in the past? What has worked for you in the past? Because they, you as a facilitator might realize that, man, yeah, that sounds like that is so, that's a really tough situation. What have you done in the past that's worked for self-care? Because, the best, really, I think at the end of the day, I like that you're saying, like, we're not here to fix anybody. And at the end of the day, everyone has the answers within themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we don't need to give advice, because that person already knows what works for them. And what me sharing what works for me might not be beneficial to them at all in that situation. So trying to turn it back to them, be like, gosh, that sounds so hard. What do you do to take care of yourself? How do you cope? How do you get through this? Or, how have you gotten through tough stuff in the past? Trying to remind them that they do already have those tools within themselves.
So what I hear you saying, Valerie, is you are validating, you're supporting and validating the person, that normalizing that this sounds very difficult for you. Mm-hmm. And what are the tools that you've used, ... Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Yes. And Nancy, did you have something else to add?
Oh, very similar to what Valerie said. And I think it's, and there's nothing wrong with opening it to the group and saying, has anyone else felt this way? Is anyone else experiencing a difficult time focusing on yourself? And what's, just because it hasn't worked for me, I'd like to hear what other people are doing, because I'm going through that right now. And everyone keeps saying, Nancy, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself. I said, I know, so it's not that I don't know, but he needs so much help. So I wouldn't mind hearing what other people are doing that's been successful.
And that's the whole point of the support group. And that's why it works so well, because you're in a room that is safe, because everybody knows what you're going through to some degree. Of course, we all are individuals, and we can't just expect that or assume that we all feel the same, but we all have the same feelings about things. So knowing that, we can put ourselves into each other's shoes. Yes, that's the beauty of the group. Absolutely. Anyone else? Yes.
Just to piggyback kind of on Valerie's statement, we have to believe that individuals are creative, resourceful, and whole. Right. So through a series of questioning and pulling that out, we each have those individual needs for our self-care, self-development, to be able to move forward. So Valerie, I really appreciated what you had to say, because I love, Wendy, where you go with the line, the what questions, the how questions, to keep the questions coming, because when you share these experiences, they're memorable to people, and then they can continue to carry them with them and move forward, right? So individually, what Nancy might need to take care of herself is different than what I need to take care of myself, and so forth. So just asking those what questions, so impactful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm just reading something Valerie wrote, which is also very interesting. It's helpful to recognize, she said, when a participant just wants to share instead of getting suggestions. She says, since suggestions gets into fixing. Now that's interesting because I never thought of suggestions as fixing. However, as we said, it's what's behind it. Honestly, sometimes I am trying to give my children suggestions because I really want them to maybe do it. You know what I'm saying? So that is the fixing. That's the part that I need to look at in myself, because that's not unconditional acceptance. That's not letting them live their life. That's me trying to satisfy my need for them to do something that I want them to do. That's manipulative, not in a constructive way. So that's not healthy boundaries for me. And that's something that I know of myself that I've done in the past. It all comes from love, but it's not a healthy love. It's a smothering love. It's a trying to fix love. So it is a thing that is real. And I think what's really fantastic is to be able to talk about it, to have an awareness of it in ourselves. And that's the beauty of it. So it's okay to, I hear what you're saying, Valerie, because you're saying, unless the person's asking for suggestions, yeah, like maybe we're not giving them to them because they haven't asked, right? Instead of this, do you notice sometimes in a group, this onslaught of, well, have you tried? Have you tried? Have you tried? Have you tried? And it comes from a place of care and compassion. And it sometimes isn't exactly what is needed and being asked for in the moment. Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on any of this?
So it would be okay for the facilitator to say, would you like some suggestions from others in the group about that? And then
there you go.
The answer can be yes or no, and they can just turn it off if they don't really want that. You know?
Beautiful, beautiful, Julian. You're a natural. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so much of this, ladies and gentlemen, is intuitive, and yet there is a framework around it. It's kind of like parenting. People think, or caregiving, people think you're supposed to know how to do it. And then you're in the situation, you're like, how do you do this? Well, it's the same thing with group facilitation. You have an intuitive knowledge of all of the things, and we're putting it into a structure for you so that it makes sense. It's a recipe. But you, of all people, have you are compassionate souls. You have everything you need to do it, and trusting your instincts and using the questioning, as Mary Jo said, MJ said, is just that in of itself is going to take you a long, long way. Any other questions about any of the problems or any of the extra ones that I said that might, not problems, but they're potential challenges, things that people are a little bit concerned about sometimes? Yes, Lisa.
We have a couple of members who they tend to perseverate on kind of the negative side, either if they've had a loved one who passed, just kind of the regret and the grief and wish I had known kind of things. What is a good way to help them be heard and help them with processing their grief, but also make sure that that doesn't take over everything else? And because there are times in which it's good to release the grief, and then there's other times in which it seems like they're kind of stuck in the same place every month.
I love that you brought this up. Very common question. And again, it goes back a little bit to the purpose. So I'll take us back to the purpose. Our purpose is to share experiences. And if that is keeping people from sharing experiences, then we have to figure out a way to move people into a place where we can. However, my guess is because those individuals, or some individuals, let's just say, including us, are at times stuck in a place where we're just not ready to move, we unconditionally are going to accept that and not expect anything more. Because our purpose of our group is to share experiences, not to move people through grief, not to help them move through their grief journey, not to help them see what's going to happen is people are going to heal through your groups, and they are going to move through loss and grief with the compassion that is essential and implicit in the container of this support group. It's going to happen, but it's not going to happen because of something you are purposely doing. All you have to do is encourage the sharing of experiences and to keep it there. I know sometimes, again, it comes from a place where it's really hard to see people suffer, isn't it? And that's what caregiving is also, such a challenge for caregivers. And as facilitators, it's really hard to see people suffer as they are seemingly going through the grief journey and seemingly stuck, we use that term, in the journey of moving through grief. However, this is where they need to be. And unconditionally accepting a person is accepting that. And when a person feels that it's okay to be where they are, instead of feel like they're being moved or pushed, they're going to more easily move on their own. And that's the love that we give. That's what's special. Yeah. Thank you. Does that make sense, Lisa, a little bit? Good. How about you, Eileen? What did you have to say? And then Kat will go next to you.
So it's interesting, Lisa, thank you for bringing that question up. Lisa is a co-facilitator for our Dallas support group. We're so happy to have her. And it's interesting because just as she was raising her hand, I was about to raise mine because I have a similar question or point. We have about 4, and sometimes could be 5, caregivers who have experienced loss over the years who continue to join our group. And the reason they do is because some of them have expressed the fact that they want to be able to share some of their methods of dealing with situations, what they did, and to just continue to support others in the group that they have become close to. And I've tried to, in a way, encourage a separation. I used to have a caregiver only and a caregiver and patient support group, but that became a problem because the people who attended the caregiver support group then wouldn't come for the caregiver and patient support group. So I wasn't hearing the patients' voices. So I combined them again, and this is before Lisa joined. But at any rate, I started I encouraged some of these caregivers to have lunch, and we ended up forming a social club. I hoped to kind of pull them away from the group and be a part of the social club, because in a lot of instances, when there is loss in our group, and we've suffered several this summer, we don't want to continue to focus on that. As you say, this is a group where we're trying to allow people a place to talk and share their stories or their concerns or their questions. And sometimes it can be come across negative. So I'm trying to coordinate that. Does anyone else here who has a support group, is my question, if I may ask a question, Wendy, have people in their support group who have experienced loss and continue to stay with the group?
Mary says, yes. I did want to respond to something that you said, but Mary, you go first. Mary, I think it doesn't appear you're muted, but yeah, we can hear you. I'm sorry. While you're doing that, I'm just going to say something. So I just want to make sure, Eileen, that I was clear about what I said, because I sometimes may not be. I think it's totally wonderful in the group to talk about loss. I think it's important to talk about all of it. The group is a container that can hold all of it. And there's nothing that you can't talk about. And that's the important thing for the facilitator. It's okay to go to the places that are hard. And I just wanted to confirm that, or, make it clear that was what I felt strongly. Mary, what were you going to say?
Can you hear me now? Does that?
Yes.
I forget that my computer is old. I've been doing this about 9 years, and the first person that we lost, the spouse, he said he wanted to come back, and the meeting was canceled because of snow, and then he never came. And then it was not until just recently, like the last year, that we had anybody say they wanted to come back. And a couple of them have come back maybe once, and they find that what the people in the group want to know is what happened. They want to know how it ended. That's the big question. And the first person that came back was a very verbal. She was just a real rock in the group. She was a nurse, and she just had a lot of good stuff to share. And she just shared what happened. Nobody had to ask or anything, and then she came back one other time, and now she's kind of saying, okay, I'm not going to be there this month, or I'm not going to. She's done that a couple of times. And I think and then there was another one that came back after, 3 or 4 years. He and I have kind of stayed in contact. He said, I think I'd like to come back. He came back once, and then he emailed me and said, I can't do it anymore. I can't go back there. And so it's kind of a hit or miss kind of thing. We haven't really had to have nobody's ever really come right out and asked a hard question, but it's never really been used for grief. So they've just kind of wanted to stay in touch to continue to help others. And there's another one now that she just lost her husband. And she said, I just feel like I have a lot of information, and I want to make my loss mean something. Now, so she's come back a couple of times. It's just been like nothing's ever changed. No one's asked a question. She's, said a thing here or there. So it's been good, but I also find that once or twice, and then they realize, and I've kind of learned that I can get really close to people, and they can come for 4 or 5 years, and we get, I think, really close, and then it's done. When the person passes, I realize then my role in their life kind of is over, and it just kind of naturally would just go on. So we haven't really experienced any issues with it.
So one thing I would also like to ask is, this could be an opportunity to encourage people to come back into the fold of CurePSP when they're ready, either to act as a peer facilitator or to act as a group facilitator. That would be a really great opportunity to keep people involved in a way that is a new role for them, because it's almost like they've transitioned through the support group, but there may be something more that they'd like to do and give, like you give back. So I'd like to just go to the other questions, and then we'll move on with our presentation a little bit to the final piece. So Eileen, did you have something else you wanted to add around that?
I just wanted to say to Mary, that's a good point. A lot of the people come back and I've asked a couple of them if they would like to be co-facilitators, but they said, no, I get gratification of being here, and I feel like I am supporting this group along with you, and I don't want to change that role. So we leave it as it is.
That's such a good thought, though. I had never thought of it. So
yeah, and Mary, that is really something that I embrace, because I encourage people to be a part of the volunteer network that we have and to help out as much as they can. And by the way, these people have actually helped me out by going to other people's houses. We had a person who was MSA living alone, And this one person on our support group, he was a caregiver for his wife who had MSA for years. Long story short, he actually went to her home along with the caregiver was there to try to help her navigate a facility because she needed to get out of her house.
Wow.
But I feel say thank you so much, Wendy, and as far as grief goes, we talk about that a lot.
So there's an example, Eileen. Thank you, both of you, Mary and Eileen, for your sharing. There's an example of a person becoming a peer facilitator, and maybe that's a step for some people before thinking about a group, because that could be maybe a big, at that moment, maybe too much to think about. But being a peer facilitator and helping another person, that's such a beautiful thing that you were able to guide him in that direction. And so that he could help the other person, or was it he or she could help an individual. That's fantastic. So peer supporter. I'm sorry. Thank you, Joanna.
No problem. Just wanted to clarify in case there was some confusion about the terminology we use. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And somehow I knew that, but yet it was coming out facilitator. I think I'm talking about facilitators a lot today. So thank you for clarifying. A peer supporter is the one-to-one. Yeah, which seems like it would be a natural transition possibly for people.
And also, I just wanted to mention one really quick thing for anybody that's also new here. And this is a really important conversation we're having around grief. And I just wanted to mention to the group that CurePSP also does offer a bereavement support group. So it's a wonderful thing to just bring it up for folks who have transitioned to that phase of losing a loved one. Of course, we're never trying to deter them from joining the group that they've been attending and finding strength in, but that option does exist, and there's nothing wrong with mentioning it. It might not be what they want to do, but the resource exists. Just want to make sure everybody was aware.
Very important. Wonderful that CurePSP has that resource. Kat. And then please keep your hands up, the other two people, because we'll get to you.
I'll be quick.
Yeah, that's okay.
So I was a caregiver for my mother for the last 6 years or so, and she passed away about 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to just share that when you've been a part of the support group for so long, and also just with any of these diseases, you start to gather almost like a binder of this random information in your brain, and you feel like this is so useful, I could share it to someone else. And then when you go back to the support group, it's almost as if when you lose someone, especially when you're a caregiver, your whole schedule changes in the sense that you have to replace your whole lifestyle, basically. And so sometimes the support group that you were in, it's part of that old lifestyle that you had when your loved one was still alive. And that's why I found from personal experience that it can be hard for people who are grieving to return to these support groups, because they no longer fit into that puzzle necessarily, in the sense that they've been going through this experience for so long, everybody's familiar to them, but they can't relate in the same sense, in that sometimes it can almost bring them back to a place of a life that they can't return to. That in many ways, when you're grieving, you wish you could return to it, but you also don't wish you could return to it. So I really like the idea of talking about other options. And then in addition to, I found that letting people know about possible volunteer work that they can do. A lot of, if anyone who has lost someone used a hospice company, most of the time the hospice companies, they do have a volunteer program. So reaching out to the hospice program, or maybe the hospital that person used to visit frequently. Yeah, those volunteer programs, especially around hospice, being able to be a companion, that's very rewarding. And it also allows the person to go back into that space that was so familiar to them, but also be able to move forward. But it's a great place for them to be able to share information one-on-one.
So helpful. Thank you. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for all of that. So helpful. Yes, and how about Sharon and then Julian? Sharon.
Yes, hi. I volunteered as facilitator for a woman who was taking two. She had the caregivers only and she had the joint one. When my husband died a year ago of CBD, I took on the caregivers one for her so she wouldn't have to do it twice a month. I'm telling you that I'm very, very grateful for all these suggestions that are coming out of this and the guidelines and the structure of these meetings. I have recorded it well. I wanted to just reference back for a minute, Wendy, you were talking about the subject of death. You know, if we're in atypical Parkinson's group, we're talking about people who are going to die for sure. You know, it's not Parkinson's, it's atypical Parkinson's, if that's what we're talking about here. So that subject of death is certainly going to come up. It's not to be shunned for sure. However, and I came back to order to give back, you know, just my experience, strength, and hope. That's all. But I'm glad for these guidelines for me. And I want to say that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us whose husbands died, like, you know, within a year of each other, all of us, we now meet once a week. This is what Eileen, I think, was saying, or whoever, about that. And there we can talk about about that. That's a whole different story, but certainly the subject will come up it comes up in the caregivers meetings that I do. But so anyway, I just kind of want to thank you for holding this.
Welcome. You're welcome, Sharon. Thank you for your presencing the importance of talking about death, loss, grief, death as people want to. You aren't forcing anything. You are guiding. The term facilitator and leader are very much the same. I like facilitator better because it does connote more of that sense of guiding the discussion. And yes, if people feel safe, they will bring up whatever it is that they want to talk about. And if they bring it up in a limited way, you are going to hear what they're saying and make it okay and normalize it to talk about in a more full, complete way. So you're always using your active listening to know what is it people are saying, and others will respond to them in what they hear too. So often you don't even have to do it. Someone will be talking about loss and grief and fear of death, and someone else will just start to talk about their fear of death, of their loved one dying or of their dying. And it doesn't necessarily come from you. It is the group's group. Remember, you don't have to do it. It will come from the group. Yes, go ahead, Julian. You are, I believe, still muted.
I just wanted to report my experience in the men's care partner support group that both the facilitators are men who lost their wives. And so they're sort of, you know, it's like, in a weird way, it's like they've graduated, so they know what they're talking about. I mean, it's a weird way to put it, but you know, that they've completed their support. And you know, the other thing that's helpful is that, you know, one of them has already remarried, and you know, there's life after this in some way. And so it just helps give a kind of a, I don't know, light at the end of the tunnel. And they've been very helpful in talking about it. And we've had several men that lost their wives, and they would come back a few times, and then, as I think it was so well stated by Kat, that they just didn't connect anymore. It wasn't part of their life anymore, and so they, you know, moved on.
So we want to try to encourage those people to come back in as volunteers, because what they have in their experience is so rich. And that, thank you for talking about your experience with that group, Julian. So may I just finish my little piece here? It's very short. It's just a couple slides. It's just going to bring it all together. Next slide, please. always go back to your purpose and your guidelines to provide structure. So remember that we go back to our purpose for our lighthouse. We go to our guidelines as behaviors come up, and we need to remind the group. The group will always go out of in and out of emotional content. Some groups are much more superficial and just want to talk about informational things. And if you bring out some of these things that are feelings that are underneath what people are saying, people will go to the emotional content. And we don't stay only in emotional content in any relationship. We can't do that, even a one-to-one relationship. We flow back and forth. So you can expect that in relationships and in your group, because your group is just a bunch of relationships, isn't it? The facilitator is aware of the individual as well as the whole group. You're the one person in the group, unless you have a co-facilitator, that's looking at everyone and listening to everyone and present to everyone and hearing what's underneath what's being said, feelings that you can bring up and out, asking questions about how people are feeling and experiencing things. So that's what's different, very different. No one else is thinking like that. Trust your instincts. You've got it all, like we said before. And the next slide. So you can use the group guidelines to redirect the group member during the group, as we said. And there were a couple examples brought up of how, like interrupting was one of them and how we did that. You can redirect the whole group. You're going back to the guidelines and saying, you know, that we want to give everyone a chance, so let's try it this way. You can also discuss an issue with a group member outside of the group, as we talked about before. Yes, let's go to the next slide. The best thing, my favorite thing, is the summary. Summary is so great because it's the way you bring it all together. And it's the completeness. It's the cherry on top, you might say, of the ice cream sundae. So at about 10 minutes before the end of your group, you're going to say, we have about 10 minutes left. Again, depending on the size of your group. If it's a bigger group, you may need 15. If it's a smaller group, you might have 5. So you'll get a sense of that. But about 10 minutes, you say it. So everyone still has a lot to talk about. I know if they're very actively talking, but we need to just bring the group now to a close, knowing we're going to be together in a month or whenever your next meeting is. So we'll go around now, and each person can share just one thing that they're going to take with them today from the group meeting. Just one thing maybe that was helpful, or one thing that you learned. And this isn't a time to talk a lot. It's just a time to say one thing, like a little phrase. What will you take with you today? And this is the way we'll sum up. So each person will go around the room, and I would say we would do that. In fact, let's just see real quick if we can we real quick do it? Just like if you said one thing. All right, Julian, one thing. You show us how it's done. What are you going to take with you today?
Oh, what am I going to do and take with me today?
One thing.
That we're not trying to make them do anything.
Perfect. Thank you. Janine, one thing.
The use of the word we.
Love it. Thank you. Sharon.
That you've given me structure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to skip Joanna and Nancy.
That it's all about sharing experiences.
Oh, love it. Love it so much. You are so good. Joan Havens.
I think listening with empathy.
Oh, love it. Valerie.
If someone is speaking too much, to address it within the group to promote trust and problem solving in the group.
With the guidelines. Excellent. Eileen.
You're muted, Eileen.
Awareness of wanting to fix.
Ah, love it. That's my constant work. MJ.
Structure.
Wonderful. Kat.
The sometimes people's behaviors are not up to us. We can only be there to listen.
Beautiful. Lisa.
Create space for their own pace.
I love that. Create space for their own pace. That's a great mantra. We should all write that one down. And I'll skip Kelsey Stewart. If you're with us. Stuart may or may not be with us. Did I get everybody? I think I did. But if I missed you, please say so. So this empowers each individual in the group. You don't have to make it like I did, just one word. You know, they can say a phrase, but if you're in a tight squeeze at the end, you can do it that way. And more really trying to focus people on a word. And you were also great about making it short. If someone does bring up a whole new problem or issue or something they want to talk about, you can say, this is so important. Let's remember to bring that up first thing next meeting. And you remember, just in case I forget. So you don't want to put it on you. This empowers the group as a whole. It provides a sense of meaning for the group. We learn about each other because what one person says is something that maybe we didn't even notice. It provides this great sense of completion, and the members want to come back for more. And the last slide, and this is just kind of so perfect because one of you said this about being a volunteer. So this is a support group facilitator commented, taking that negative, taking that dark moment of time, that nightmare, and how to turn it into a positive through volunteering to help someone. By doing what I'm doing with volunteer work, I am taking that situation and I'm trying to make some good from the situation. So thank you, each of you, for doing that. And this is my name. This is my email. Please feel free to contact me. I'm going to let Joanna talk about the support society calls. She's just going to take a few minutes to wrap things up now. Thank you so much. It's been my honor to be with you today. And we continue and we do all these problems on our support society call, don't we? Eileen and Mary. So please join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And thanks everybody for their beautiful involvement. And on behalf of CurePSP, we just can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your Saturday to be with us and discuss such an important role, excuse me. And it's just lovely to see so many new faces. So really quickly, Kelsey and I are both going to run through this presentation. I know we only have 15 minutes left. We want to get you out of here on time. So we're going to breeze through, but please stop us if you have any questions. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joanna Teeters. I am the support programs manager at CurePSP. And Kelsey, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Woods, the community and resource manager here at CurePSP. And I do see, Janine, you have your hand raised. Do you want to speak briefly, or once we're done?
I just had a question. We don't have a support group anywhere locally on the western slope of Colorado. And I'm curious, how do I reach out to physicians to let them know that they can refer patients or share my phone number? How is that done?
It's a good question. And it's something that we can definitely speak with you more one-on-one about. Basically, CurePSP is a very grassroots organization. We don't keep lists of neurologists or physicians in any given state, but we do have ways of getting contact information for movement disorder specialists in Colorado through the Movement Disorder Center. I'm forgetting what the exact name of the organization is, but anyway, there's a finder, a location finder online that we can access. Anybody can access. It's like I said, it's very grassroots. If there are offices in your area that you want to go drop off a flyer, CurePSP can make you a flyer. We're also going to touch in this conversation on some of the marketing tools that CurePSP can offer to getting the word out if you want to start a support group, because that is exactly what Kelsey and I are here to help you do. If there is a group that you're looking to start in your local region, we can reach out to folks in our database. We also have doctors and physicians and therapists in our database, so we can send out those email blasts and help to stir up some attention around a new group.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we're going to go through a couple of things here. I know we have a mix of folks who are currently leading groups, folks who have led groups in the past, folks who are interested in possibly getting a group started, like you, Janine, which is so great. So we want to bring your attention to the educational resources that we offer and how to order them. We're going to talk about the support programs and kind of continuing education opportunities that we offer for our volunteers. Our support programs that CurePSP offers as well, so that, you know, a big thing that we're always trying to do is make sure that our volunteers who are out there doing such important work as peer supporters and support group leaders, or just local advocates, understand what CurePSP is doing and what resources exist for families who are handling a diagnosis. We'll talk about those marketing tools and then some other ways that we as the patient and care partner department can support you in your volunteerism. So I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey to talk about the educational resources that we have.
Absolutely. So we have a large library of educational resources that are available via print and digital that offer guidance and tools for life with PSP, CBD, or MSA. And I hope that all of you have taken advantage of them. And if you haven't, they are all available to order and download on our website. And so just really bringing back sometimes when people are looking for more concrete answers, a little bit of symptom management, and it might be, you know, maybe too medical for a support group, always leading them back to these educational resources. And these are available free of charge for families, and they're welcome to order as many copies as they'd like to share with their friends, family, neighbors, loved ones, and of course, even their healthcare professionals, maybe a speech therapist, a physical therapist who may not know the specifics of PSP, CBD, and MSA. We have educational materials for them. So just kind of guiding people back to these really important resources. Do you have any questions on these bundles? We have the bundles and then also the guidebook as well. Awesome. I hope you're all taking advantage of them and continue to let your people know about them.
And we used to, you know, when groups were really meeting in person all the time, we would send, you know, big shipments of our educational materials for our support group leaders to hand out to people. But of course, times have changed. So sending around the link to order, you know, people's own stash to keep at home is a viable option. A couple of our support programs that we think it's really important for our volunteers to understand and know about. We have a CurePSP respite program, provides 15 families quarterly, which is 60 families annually, with a grant of 60 hours of in-home respite care provided by a home care agency of their choice. So, you know, these conversations about needing caregivers or, you know, caregiver burnout come up in support groups often. You can always encourage your support group attendees to apply for the respite care program. CurePSP offers 16 virtual support groups that are specific to diagnosis or demographic. Those are open to anyone really internationally. As you know, we encourage folks who are looking for a support group to try out a couple of different virtual support groups so that you can get a feel for the different facilitation styles of each of our leaders. We also have 38 regional support groups, which of course we're always trying to increase that number and create a support group in every major metropolitan area, every state. And then we also have connection available to 70 peer supporters, which is the one-on-one connection. And for those of you that are here today with interest, of course, in becoming a facilitator, if that doesn't feel like the right thing for you, but you'd like to volunteer with CurePSP, that opportunity to become a peer supporter is always available to you. And also, as we touched on in the conversation with Wendy, it's available for folks who are joining your group and really have that desire to continue to share their hard-earned, wisdom with others. You can find information about that on our website. CurePSP curates 2 family conferences every year, probably one in person and one hybrid, or one virtual. We just held our virtual family conference yesterday. We have 4 Ask the Expert webinars per year. We have 4 community conversations webinars per year. We're always coming up with different ways to promote and present diagnosis specific information to our community to encourage engagement and connection and awareness and education. For the Brain Donation Assistance Program, which is a really crucial program that CurePSP supports, we do provide families with up to $1,000 in a reimbursement for related costs having to do with brain tissue harvest and donation to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. They are our partner for Brain Bank. They are looking to expand that Brain Bank network so that we can have people donate brain tissue to different centers. But at the moment, the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida is our main partner for that. And the reimbursement program is a crucial part of our mission here at CurePSP. And lastly, on this page, having an understanding of our centers of care network is also important. The Center of Care Network is comprised of 30 medical centers across the US and Canada that exists in partnership with CurePSP to help provide quicker and more accurate diagnoses to patients, expert clinical care, and access to clinical trials. You can view the list of all of those participating centers of care on our website. And of course, for those who are attending our support group and maybe looking for a second opinion or looking for a doctor that has more understanding about PSP or CBD or MSA, you can always bring up the fact that the Centers of Care Network exists. It won't be, unfortunately, regionally viable for everyone, but we do our best to try to spread those centers all over the US and Canada.
I'd love to talk about the continuing education for our facilitators. So these are ways that we can help get our volunteers more involved, more active with each other, and get to know you, and also be able to share information like we've shared on the 2 previous slides with you, the specifics when an event is coming up, to let your group always know about them. So one way we do that is by our every other month office hours that Joanna and I host. And like I said, we talk about our new resources, our upcoming events, and then just have nice open conversations with all our volunteers, peer supporters, and support group leaders. What's working, what's not working, anything that they want to see the foundation work on too. We have really open, honest conversations and get to know each other in a nice way there. So would love to have you at those office hour sessions, and it keeps you nice and aware to then share with your group. And I know when I'm on specific support groups, I join the women's support group, and every time we start the meeting, I'm sure to send them the link for the upcoming family conferences, upcoming free webinars, and just kind of start there and then move into the more emotional stuff, but have those kind of concrete resources ready for them. Support Society is our monthly support group for support group leaders, led by Wendy, and that's specifically for group leaders to discuss group dynamics, difficult topics, and dig a little deeper into facilitating even than we've gotten today. So it kind of, those resemble our conversation that we had about 20 minutes ago, and really get to dive deep in those good conversations. And those happen monthly. Also, Joanna and I host quarterly website navigation webinars, and this is our main way to get our volunteers really geared up with the skills they need to provide families living with PSP, CBD, and MSA. So just kind of where to find things on our website, what resources we offer, kind of highlighting the respite grant, being able to guide people to the resources that they need, especially on the website, which is very much chock full of information. And then lastly, our volunteer portal is our hub for connecting education to our volunteers. So we have our all of the upcoming events. We have upcoming office hours, Support Society, all listed on there with the registration links. We also offer some difficult topic conversations and an outline of how to maybe navigate them in your group, whether it's medical aid and dying or something like that might be hard to talk about, and we want to get you geared up with the main resources to be able to tackle those tough conversations. And then also we do, as Valerie mentioned earlier, have the group norms and expectations document that we encourage people to share at least portions of at the beginning of every meeting. It's a big document. And so you can kind of pick and choose and really get the meeting started on a good note, kind of getting all those guidelines out and upfront. And also, of course, sharing the purpose statement, which we all know is very important.
And we also keep all of our recordings of the meeting. So for example, this training has been recorded and will be archived on the volunteer portal. So this is really your hub for accessing any meetings or documents having to do with structure or guidelines for support groups and volunteerism with CurePSP. And that is it's not a public facing, it is a private page. So you do have to contact us, make sure that you're kind of enrolled in the volunteer network, and then we'll provide you with the password and login to access that volunteer portal. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can support you as CurePSP volunteers. So for those of you who are interested in starting groups, please, bottom line, contact myself or Kelsey. Our information will be on the next slide. CurePSP is happy to help you get your group off the ground. We're happy to help you host your support group on the Zoom license. Most of our national support groups and many of our regional support groups, even if they're led by individual volunteers, are held on the CurePSP Zoom license. And we are here to be your technical support for that. So, if you want to discuss who the group is for, when the group is going to meet, CurePSP will cross the T's and dot the I's to make sure that the group is up and running and getting out to whoever it needs to get out to. You can also opt to use your own Zoom platform if that's easier for you. We did want to, ask that if you are already holding a group or you plan to hold a group on your own platform, that you do send us the registration list. This is the best way for CurePSP to keep its larger community up to speed and engaged in our database so that people are aware of all of the different things that CurePSP has to offer. As I mentioned to Janine, if you're starting a group or you're currently running a group and you're noticing a dip in your attendees, or you're looking to spread the word to local medical centers or therapists or anyone in your area, we are glad always to send out email blasts on behalf of your group. So we can send out targeted lists to families who are living in your state or neighboring states if you choose to do a virtual group. And of course, it's up to you to decide if you want to do a virtual group or if you're looking to do an in-person group. And, I think, before the pandemic, all of our groups were meeting in person except for a few. Now it is the absolute opposite way around. And I really think that it is a silver lining about the regional groups meeting online is that they're, people from the next state over, if there's not a group meeting in North Dakota, but there is meeting in South Dakota, they can join that group virtually without having to drive 10 hours. So it's also important to keep us informed about any changes regarding your group. We won't know about the changes unless you tell us, and we would love to keep our website and our information up to date so that people can access that information whenever they need it. Please contact us with any questions at all. As I mentioned, Kelsey and I are going to be your contacts moving forward. If you're interested in starting a group, or if you need to connect with us for any reason at all regarding a current group or future group, we are so grateful to you for being here today and for your commitment to CurePSP's mission. So thank you. Any questions at all? Well, all right then. Wendy, do you want to take us out? Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all once again. Thank you for everything you do. And maybe we could everybody can go off mute and you can just say goodbye as you go. But I so look forward to seeing you before you go at a support society call meeting as soon as you come. We're having one on Monday at 4 if you're available. They alternate Mondays and Thursdays at 4 once a month. And I would like to thank CurePSP for all these incredible things that you do, and all of you for helping others in the ways that you do. It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.